respected, before you judge the mirror, before you let society decide your worth, before you shrink yourself because of a number attached to your age or a comment about your appearance. Pause. Because the very thing they mocked may be the evidence of your strength. The lines on your face, the changes in your body, the uniqueness in your look, they may not be flaws. They may be proof that you survived battles no one knows about. I want to speak to the person who has ever felt underestimated because of how they look. To the one who was told, you look too young to lead. To the one who heard, you were too old to start. To the one who stood in a room and felt invisible because they did match the world's definition of impressive. I want you to lean in closely because this message is for you. There was a time in my life when I walked into a room full of decision makers, leaders, professionals who had titles longer than their resumes. I was prepared. I had studied. I had worked on myself in silence. But before I even opened my mouth, I saw it in their eyes. Doubt, confusion, judgment. They were trying to calculate my age. They were measuring my appearance against their expectation. One of them whispered, not quietly enough, "Is he old enough for this?" Another smiled politely, but the smile carried a message. "You don't look like what we expected." And in that moment, I felt something rise in me. Not anger, not insecurity, but awareness. Awareness that the world often confuses appearance with ability, that people mistake youth for immaturity and age for irrelevance. That we have been conditioned to believe that leadership must look a certain way, success must wear a certain face, and wisdom must arrive with gray hair. But wisdom does not ask for permission to exist. Strength does not need wrinkles to prove itself, and potential does not wait for society as approval. Let me tell you something Dr. David often emphasizes in his philosophy of growth. Your identity is not determined by perception, it is revealed through pressure. When life squeezes you, who you really are shows up. And sometimes the shock on people's faces is not because you look different, it is because they did not expect depth from someone packaged in your form. I remember being told at 22 that I was too young to understand pain, too young to counsel others, too young to speak about life. Yet the same people did not see the nights I spent fighting silent battles. They did not see the responsibilities I carried earlier than most. They did not see the lessons I learned the hard way. They saw a number, they assumed a story, and that is what people do. They assume stories about you based on your appearance. If you look youthful, they assume you lack experience. If you look older, they assume your time has passed. If you look different from the standard, they assume you are less capable. But the most dangerous thing you can do is begin to believe their assumptions. There was a season when I almost did. I began shrinking my voice. I tried to dress older, speak more cautiously, dim my enthusiasm, just to fit into the expectation of what credible looked like. I tried to age myself artificially because I thought maturity had a uniform. But here is the truth I discovered. Authenticity carries more authority than imitation. The moment I stopped trying to look the part and started living the purpose, everything shifted. One day, in another meeting, someone made the same comment. "You look very young for someone doing this work." But this time, I smiled. I did to defend myself. I did to over-explain. I simply said, "Thank you. It means I have more years to serve." The room went silent. Big confidence disarms criticism. Understand this deeply. When your appearance shocks people, it is often because you are breaking their mental limitations. You are expanding their understanding of what is possible. You are challenging stereotypes without even trying. There is a young woman who shared her story with me. She was promoted to a leadership role in her early 20s. The first week, one of her team members asked her, "Are you the intern?" She laughed it off in front of them, but she cried in her car later. Not because of the question itself, but because it triggered every insecurity she had been carrying. But instead of quitting, she decided to grow. She sharpened her skills. She studied her craft relentlessly. She treated every doubt as fuel. And months later, the same people who questioned her were asking for her guidance. Her appearance had not changed dramatically. Her age had not jumped 10 years. What changed was her posture, her clarity, her belief in herself. Dr. David teaches that growth is internal before it becomes visible. When you mature, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, it radiates from you. People may still comment on your age, but they will no longer question your impact. Now let me speak to the other side of this story. The one who feels too old. The one who looks in the mirror and sees lines that were not there before. The one who hears society whisper, "Your prime has passed." I once met a man in his late 50s who wanted to start a new career. He told me, "I am embarrassed. Everyone starting with me is half my age." He felt out of place. He felt exposed. He thought his age was a liability, but what he did not realize was that his years were not chains. They were tools. The discipline he built over decades, the resilience from past failures, the patience developed through raising a family, these were advantages. When he finally stepped into that new field, people were shocked, not because he was old, but because he moved with a steadiness that only experience can give. While others panicked under pressure, he remained grounded. While others chased validation, he focused on excellence. Your age is not your enemy, it is your evidence. Evidence that you have survived. Evidence that you have learned. Evidence that you are still here. And your appearance, it tells a story. The scar you hide may represent healing. The weight you gained may reflect seasons of stress you endured. The gray hair may be wisdom earned through sleepless nights of responsibility. Why are we so quick to criticize the proof of our survival? The world will always have opinions. It will measure you by the surface because that is easy, but depth requires attention. And not everyone is willing to look deeper. So the question is not whether people are shocked by your appearance or age. The question is, are you shocked by your own strength? Have you paused long enough to acknowledge how far you have come? Have you recognized that the very thing you were insecure about may be the mark of your uniqueness? There is power in embracing your season. If you are young, embrace your energy. If you are older, embrace your wisdom. If you look different, embrace your distinctiveness. Because the world does not need another copy. It needs courage in its raw form. When I stopped apologizing for how I looked and how old I was, something profound happened. I began to attract opportunities aligned with my authenticity. I no longer had to convince people I was capable. My work spoke, my consistency proved, my character testified, and yes, some were still shocked, but now their shock turned into respect. The transformation did not happen overnight. It required inner work. It required confronting my insecurities. It required asking myself hard questions. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I truly believe about my worth? Am I allowing a mirror to define my mission? You must answer these questions honestly, because the battle is rarely external. It is internal. The world's comments hurt most when they echo doubts you already have. But once you silence that inner critic, the outer noise loses power. I want you to imagine walking into your next opportunity with unshakable confidence. Not arrogance, not pride, but grounded assurance. Imagine speaking without shrinking. Imagine showing up without disguising yourself. Imagine realizing that you are not behind, not ahead, just exactly where you need to be. That realization will shock people more than anything else. And this is only the beginning of the story. There was a turning point in my journey when I realized something that changed everything. It was not when people finally started applauding. It was not when the compliments replaced the criticism. It was the day I understood that the shock on their faces had very little to do with me and everything to do with their limitations. You see, when someone says, "You don't look like you belong here," what they are really saying is, "You don't fit the image I created in my mind." And the truth is, you were never meant to fit someone else's image. You were meant to expand it. Dr. David often speaks about the danger of shrinking to survive. He says that many people live small lives not because they lack greatness, but because they fear standing out. They fear the discomfort of being different. They fear the tension that comes when their appearance contradicts expectations. I remember standing on a stage for the first time in front of a large audience. I could see the whispers, I could see the scanning eyes. Some looked curious. Some looked skeptical. I heard someone in the front row say quietly, "He looks so young." For a brief second, the old insecurity tried to return. The voice that said, "Prove yourself, overperform, speak faster, impress them." But another voice rose stronger, a calm voice that said, "You don't need to prove your worth. You need to express your truth." And that is what I did. I spoke from experience. I spoke from scars. I spoke from lessons that were not learned in classrooms but in valleys. As I continued, the room shifted. The same faces that once questioned now leaned in. The same eyes that once doubted now softened with understanding. By the end of that session, the comment changed. It was no longer, "He looks young." It became, "I did expect that depth." That sentence stayed with me. I did expect that depth. It revealed something powerful. People are often surprised not because you are incapable, but because they underestimated what could come from someone who looks like you. And this is where many people sabotage themselves. When they feel underestimated, they either retreat or they rebel. They either hide or they become defensive. But there is a third option. Rise quietly and let your substance speak. There was a young man who wrote to me after one of my talks. He said he always felt dismissed because of his baby face. Even in his late 20s, People assumed he was a teenager. He struggled in professional spaces because clients did not take him seriously at first glance. He told me he began growing a beard, changing his wardrobe, deepening his voice intentionally, all to look older. But no matter what he changed externally, the comments persisted. Until one day he decided to focus less on appearing older and more on becoming sharper. He invested in his knowledge. He mastered his craft so thoroughly that when he spoke, doubt had no room to breathe. He said something that moved me deeply. He said, "I stopped trying to look experienced and started becoming undeniable." Undeniable. That is the word. When you become undeniable in character, skill, discipline, and integrity, your age becomes a footnote. Your appearance becomes secondary. Yes, people may still notice it, but they cannot argue with impact. Now let me take you deeper. Sometimes the shock is not about looking young. Sometimes it is about looking different. Perhaps you do not fit the cultural standard of beauty. Perhaps your body changed after illness, after childbirth, after hardship. Perhaps you carry visible reminders of invisible battles. Society has a cruel way of worshipping perfection and overlooking perseverance. We celebrate flawless images while ignoring resilient souls. And when you show up boldly in a body that tells a different story, it unsettles people. I met a woman who survived a serious accident that left a visible scar across her face. For months, she avoided social gatherings. She felt exposed. She believed people only saw the scar and not the strength behind it. One day, she shared something profound. She said, "I realized that my scar is not a symbol of what broke me. It is a symbol of what did." That sentence carries power. What did he break you? When she began speaking openly about her experience, something remarkable happened. Instead of pity, she received admiration. Instead of avoidance, she received connection. People were shocked, not by the scar, but by her courage to own it. You see, when you hide what makes you different, you give it power over you. But when you embrace it, you transform it into authority. Dr. David teaches that purpose often hides inside the very thing you are insecure about. The insecurity becomes the doorway to impact. The weakness becomes the platform for strength. Think about it. If you always look perfect, you might never develop humility. If you were always taken seriously, you might never build resilience. If you never face doubt, you might never discover determination. The shock in people as reactions is sometimes the announcement that you have outgrown their perception. But let us be honest, this journey is not easy. There are days when comments sting, days when comparison creeps in, days when you scroll through images of others who seem more polished, more established, more ideal. On those days, you must return to truth. Your value is not measured in symmetry. Your destiny is not determined by a date of birth. Your calling does not expire because of a wrinkle or accelerate because of smooth skin. You are not late. You are not early. You are not too much. You are not too little. There was a season when I compared myself constantly. I would look at others my age who seemed ahead. I would look at elders who commanded instant respect and wonder if I would ever be seen the same way. Comparison drained my joy. It made me question progress that was actually significant. But then I realized something transformative. The timeline that matters is not society's timeline. It is your obedience to growth. It is your commitment to becoming better than yesterday. When you focus on that, comparison loses its grip. And here is what is beautiful. When you embrace your current season fully, you inspire others to do the same. A teenager who sees you succeeding young gains permission to dream earlier. A middle-aged person who sees you reinvent yourself gains permission to start again. An older individual who sees you thriving later in life gains permission to refuse retirement from purpose. Your appearance and age may shock people, but your courage gives them hope. Let me ask you something deeply personal. What have you been apologizing for? Have you been apologizing for looking too young, for aging naturally, for not matching an unrealistic standard? What if you stopped apologizing today? What if instead of saying, "I know I am young," but you said, "I am prepared"? What if instead of saying, "I'm already too old to," you said, "I still have breath," and that means possibility? The shift is subtle but powerful. In my journey, the more I leaned into who I truly was, the less I needed validation. I stopped chasing approval and started pursuing excellence. I stopped trying to change my reflection and started strengthening my foundation. And slowly the narrative changed. The same people who once questioned my age began to introduce me with respect. The same individuals who once overlooked me began to seek my insight. Not because I aged dramatically, not because I transformed my appearance, but because consistency built credibility. Consistency will silence more critics than charisma ever could. And this leads us to a deeper layer of this conversation. The real shock is not your appearance. It is your endurance. It is your refusal to quit. It is your decision to grow in a world that constantly tries to label you. You are not here to meet expectations. You are here to exceed limitations. But there is more to uncover in this journey. More layers to peel back. More truths to confront about identity, perception, and purpose. There comes a moment in every person's life when the external noise becomes unbearable. The comments, the sideways glances, the subtle dismissals, they begin to echo louder than your own inner voice. And if you are not careful, you will start living according to those echoes. I want to take you into a deeper place now. Because this conversation is no longer just about how others see you. It is about how you see yourself when no one is watching. Dr. David teaches that self-perception is the foundation of destiny. If you see yourself as small, you will shrink in rooms that require boldness. If you see yourself as outdated, you will hesitate in moments that require innovation. If you see yourself as inadequate because of how you look or how old you are, you will unconsciously sabotage opportunities meant for you. There was a season when I realized that the real battle was not convincing others of my capability. It was convincing myself. I would stand in front of a mirror and analyze everything. Maybe if I looked older. Maybe if I looked more polished. Maybe if I had fewer lines. It sounds subtle, but those thoughts create internal fractures. And fractured confidence cannot carry heavy purpose. One day, after a particularly difficult experience where I felt underestimated again, I sat alone and asked myself a simple but life-altering question. If no one had ever commented on my age or appearance, would I still doubt myself? The answer shook me. No. Which meant the doubt was not originally mine. It had been planted. Repeated comments had slowly shaped my internal narrative. That is how conditioning works. Society repeats something long enough, and you begin to believe it. Too young, too old, not attractive enough. Not strong enough, not impressive enough, but who defines enough? I remember meeting a woman in her 40s who wanted to go back to university. Every time she mentioned it to friends, they would laugh lightly and say, "At this age." That phrase haunted her. At this age. As if learning had an expiration date. As if growth required youth. For years, she postponed her dream. Not because she lacked ability. Not because she lacked resources. But because she internalized that question. Until one day, she attended a small seminar where someone said something that pierced her heart. If you don't start now, you will still age. The only difference is whether you age with regret or with growth. She enrolled the next month. On her first day, she felt out of place. Surrounded by younger students, she questioned herself again. But instead of withdrawing, she leaned in. She participated. She studied harder than anyone else. She embraced her perspective shaped by decades of life experience. By the end of the year, she was not just surviving, she was excelling. Professors respected her insights. Students sought her advice. And the same people who once laughed were now stunned. Not stunned by her age, stunned by her courage. This is what happens when you refuse to let labels dictate your trajectory. You shock people, not because you look different, but because you refuse to live small. Now let me speak about something even deeper, the fear of visibility. Sometimes we hide behind insecurity because visibility feels risky. If you step forward boldly and still fail, it hurts more. If you own your uniqueness and still face criticism, it feels heavier. So we dim ourselves preemptively. We tell ourselves, I'll wait until I look better. I'll start when I feel more confident. I'll apply when I'm older. I'll try when I am younger. But confidence does not precede action. It grows through action. When I began embracing my voice fully, I did not suddenly feel fearless. I felt exposed. Every time someone commented on my youthful appearance, I felt a flicker of discomfort. But instead of retreating, I used that discomfort as confirmation that I was stepping into growth. Growth is uncomfortable because it stretches identity. Dr. David often says that your greatest transformation will occur at the intersection of insecurity and obedience. When you obey your calling despite insecurity, something powerful awakens within you. I experienced this during a major opportunity that felt far beyond me. The invitation came unexpectedly. A platform larger than anything I had experienced before. My first thought was not excitement. It was fear. They will see how young I look. They will question me. They will realize I'm not enough. But then I remembered every past moment when I allowed fear to shrink me. I remembered the regret that followed. And I made a decision. I would show up as I am. On the day of that event, I walked onto the stage with trembling hands but steady conviction. I did not try to sound older. I did not mask my energy. I did not pretend to be someone else. I spoke authentically, vulnerably, passionately. Afterward, a man approached me. He said, I almost did take you seriously when you walked up, but you changed my perspective completely. Notice what he said. You changed my perspective. You cannot always change how people see you at first glance, but you can change what they believe after they experience you, and that is where your power lies, in the experience you create, not the image you project. Your appearance may open or close initial assumptions, but your character determines lasting impact. Let us also talk about aging with dignity, because one of the greatest lies society tells is that youth is everything. We glorify smooth skin, fast energy and newness, but we rarely honor endurance, patience and depth. I once sat with an elderly mentor whose hands trembled slightly as he spoke. His voice was softer than it once had been, but every word carried weight. Years of mistakes refined into wisdom. Decades of perseverance distilled into clarity. He told me, when I was young, I wanted to impress people. Now I want to impact them. That sentence marked me. Youth often seeks recognition. Maturity seeks legacy. If you are aging, do not fight it in shame, embrace it with honor. Every line on your face represents laughter, tears, decisions, risks, love, and loss. That is not something to erase. That is something to respect. And if you are young, do not rush to grow older artificially. Do not suppress your creativity or energy just to appear credible. Channel it, discipline it, but do not bury it. The world needs the fire of youth and the steadiness of age. It needs innovation and wisdom. It needs bold beginnings and seasoned resilience. The shock people feel when they encounter you outside of their expectations is an opportunity. It is a doorway. You can either let it intimidate you, or you can let it introduce you to a new standard. I began to realize that every time someone said, "You don't look like what I imagined," it was an invitation to redefine what capable looks like, what leadership looks like, what strength looks like. Maybe strength looks like a young face carrying old wisdom. Maybe leadership looks like gray hair filled with new ideas. Maybe beauty looks like scars that tell survival stories. When you redefine the image, you liberate others who felt trapped by it. But this journey also requires forgiveness. Forgiveness for those who judged you. Forgiveness for yourself for believing them. Because bitterness will weigh you down more than any comment ever could. I had to forgive the voices that underestimated me, not because they were right, but because carrying resentment would have chained my growth to their ignorance. Freedom comes when you release the need to be understood by everyone. Not everyone will see your depth. Not everyone will appreciate your timing. Not everyone will celebrate your evolution, but the right people will. And when they do, the shock will transform into alignment. There is still one final layer to uncover in this story. A layer about legacy, about the example you are setting, and about the responsibility that comes with embracing your true self. When you finally stop fighting who you are, something sacred begins to unfold, not just within you, but around you. Because identity is contagious. The way you carry yourself teaches others how to carry themselves. The way you honor your season gives others permission to honor theirs. This final layer is about responsibility. Yes, responsibility. Because once you realize that your appearance and age are not obstacles but instruments, you can no longer hide behind insecurity. You understand that your life is not just about proving people wrong. It is about lifting people higher. There was a young boy who once told me that he had never seen someone who looked like him speak with confidence on a big platform. He said, "I did think people like us could do that." Those words pierced me. People like us. In that moment, I understood that representation is not vanity. It is vision. When you show up fully as yourself, you expand someone else's imagination. If you're young and disciplined, you show other young people that maturity is possible. If you are older and courageous enough to start again, you show others that it is never too late. If you carry visible scars and refuse to hide, you show someone wounded that healing can still shine. This is bigger than you. Dr. David often reminds us that purpose is not proven in comfort, it is proven in consistency. And consistency requires embracing your identity, not negotiating it. If you constantly fight how you look or how old you are, you will exhaust energy that was meant for impact. I remember the day I stopped introducing myself with disclaimers. No more subtle jokes about my age. No more over-explaining my journey to justify my presence. I simply stood, spoke, and served. The shift was immediate, not because people changed overnight, but because I changed. When you stop seeking validation, you start attracting alignment. The right doors open. The right conversations happen. The right connections form. And even when someone still looks surprised, it no longer shakes you. It amuses you. Because you know something they don't. Yet no, depth cannot be measured by appearance. There is a profound lesson in aging gracefully and living boldly at every stage. Life moves quickly. One day you are told you are too young. The next day you are told you are not young anymore. If you base your confidence on those fluctuating opinions, you will always feel misplaced. Instead, anchor yourself in growth. Ask yourself daily, am I becoming better? Am I learning? Am I serving? Am I healing? These questions matter more than mirrors. These questions matter more than birthdays. I once spoke to a group of individuals across different generations. Teenagers sat beside retirees. And I asked them all the same question. What are you waiting for? The younger ones said they were waiting to be taken seriously. The older ones said they were waiting for the right time. And I realized something powerful. Waiting is often disguised fear. The teenager fears rejection. The older individual fears embarrassment. Both are prisoners of perception. But when you decide that growth is more important than approval, you break free. I want you to imagine yourself 10 years from now, not focused on how you look, but on who you became. Will you regret shrinking? Will you regret postponing dreams because of comments? Or will you look back and smile, knowing you stepped forward anyway? Your appearance will change. That is inevitable. Your age will increase. That is certain. But your courage, that is a choice. The real shock in your story should not be that you look young or old or different. The real shock should be that despite it all, you rose. Despite the whispers, you worked. Despite the doubts, you disciplined yourself. Despite the labels, you led. And let me tell you something beautiful. When you live this way long enough, the narrative reverses. The same people who once questioned you begin using you as an example. They tell others, don't underestimate them. They speak your name with respect, not because you changed your appearance, but because you honored your assignment. There will always be someone ahead of you in years, and someone behind you in experience. That is the rhythm of life. But comparison loses meaning when you focus on contribution. If you are 20 and passionate, bring your fire. If you are 40 and reflective, bring your balance. If you are 60 and seasoned, bring your wisdom. Every stage has value. Every face carries a story. Every year adds depth. And here is the truth that must anchor your heart. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to stand firm. Standing firm does not mean arrogance. It means clarity. It means understanding that you are not a mistake in the timeline. You are not an accident in the room. You are not misplaced in this season. You are positioned. Positioned to learn. Positioned to grow. Positioned to inspire. Positioned to redefine expectations. The world will continue reacting to appearances. That will not change. But you can change how you respond. You can smile at surprise. You can meet doubt with discipline. You can meet judgment with excellence. And slowly, steadily, undeniably, you will become a living testimony that strength has no specific look and purpose has no expiration date. So the next time someone raises an eyebrow at your age or comments on your appearance, let it remind you of his journey. Let it remind you that you carry something deeper than surface impressions. Let it remind you that your life is not a performance for approval, but a mission for impact. Walk into rooms knowing that your story speaks louder than your reflection. Speak with conviction that your preparation outweighs perception. Live with the awareness that the very thing that shocks them today may inspire them tomorrow. This is your season. Not because you look the part, not because you fit the mold, but because you chose to grow beyond it.